Story 1, Scout Camp. So a couple years ago, I went to summer camp in Colorado. Ben DeLator Scout Ranch. A lot of weird things happened. While we were there, but two stuck out the most. First weird thing is we had to go find points in the wilderness, and all that to get advancements in rank. Well, my group and we were out wandering, following the trail and all that, and the counselor just leaves us while we are taking a break and goes back to the campsite and says you guys can figure it out. He just abandons us, and it's like 1030 in the morning at this point, so we are just chilling at the break stop. Then we decide to start heading back on the trail, but it doesn't lead back to the campsite. We get lost. We start walking around more and more, getting more and more lost. We miss lunch at 1200, and we are starving. Then at like 330, we finally make it back to the site, and the head counselor is like, WTF, who are you guys? And we tell him what happened. He then goes and grabs our leadership, and the counselor, and one of my friends just cusses out the counselor and goes off on them. When all is done, we go get food at the chow hall, and then the next day, the counselors acted as if it didn't happen. We asked, hey, why are you still in charge of our group when you abandoned us yesterday? He said, what are you talking about? And the only people who remember was our group and leadership. Second one, a few nights later, my friends and I decide we aren't going to sleep in our tents for the night. Instead, we are going to sleep on our cots outside, cause why not? Anyways, we are up until I'd say 0100, just talking and being kids. I decide I'm going to get some sleep finally. I scrunch up into my sleeping bag, and right as I'm about to fall asleep, my friend shakes me awake and says, hey, look up at the sky, hurry. I get out of my sleeping bag, look up, and all the stars are gone. Completely clear night, no clouds, nothing. The moon is still there. There's satellites flying by, but the stars are all gone. We all are just staring up at the sky and trying to figure it out. Finally, one of my friends goes and gets his dad up, and his dad is like, WTF, looking up. And we just are all standing there staring at the sky, wondering WTF is happening. Then out of nowhere, this aircraft, no idea what it is, just zooms by super low and loud by our campsite, waking up everyone else, and the stars are back. At breakfast the next day, a few other guys were talking about it, and we all agreed it was weird and strange. No idea what happened, but it was one of the weirdest, strangest things I've ever encountered. Story 2, about 2 years ago, I was driving home from a family reunion pretty late at night, and the drive was about 2 hours. I didn't stay the night because I had to be back for work the following day. Most of the drive was on roads with dense bushes and trees on either side, the real creepy ones you see a lot in movies. Anyway, I had been driving about 45 minutes, and I was starting to get really tired. You know how sometimes you just suddenly become really tired, out of nowhere? Well, yeah, that happened to me. I knew I wasn't going to last, but I didn't come across any place that I felt I could park and safely sleep. Anyway, after it became clear to me that I wasn't going to find a place to pull up, and my tiredness wasn't going away, I did something very questionable. I pulled over to the side of the road onto the grass, behind some bushes, to try and hide my car from anybody else who was going to come past. The roads weren't empty. I came across another car every few minutes or so. I made a mental note that the time was 11:22, and then fell asleep. Some time later, I was awoken by a scratching sound. I looked at the clock, 11:50. The sound stopped after a few seconds, and because I was still extremely tired, I didn't bother looking around and simply went back to sleep. I was later awoken by the same sound, and it was now 12:40. This time it really freaked me out because the sound didn't stop. The thought ran across my mind that it was just an animal inspecting the car. But why would it return almost an hour after it had left the previous time? I looked in my rear view mirror and just managed to catch a glimpse of something running away into the forest. Now, at the time, I thought it was the damn hook killer. You know, the one that scratched that couple's car and then slaughtered the guy when he got out to investigate. Fuck that, I thought to myself, so I got the hell out of there. There was a bend no more than 100 yards up the road, and as I came around it, there was a fucking car parked off to the side of the road with the driver's side door opened. I slowed down just to look to see if anyone was in there. There wasn't. Then I looked in my rear view mirror. I didn't see anything, and all of a sudden, this guy comes sprinting around the corner. He starts screaming at me, shouting stuff like, "Hey, hey, you get the fuck out of your car." Now I noped the fuck out of there and sped off. I never saw the guy again. Moral of the story, don't fucking sleep on the side of a deserted road. Story 3, this is not supernatural creepy, but is one of the more disturbing and surreal experiences of my life. One early morning a few short years ago, I am walking to my bus stop and eating a banana. It is dark, misty, around 5 a.m., and I am internally debating something trivial, like if I want my daily Starbucks before or after the commute. As I approach the dimly lit corner on my street, a tall man in a black mask steps out of the dark alleyway to my left. Sleepy and disoriented, I barely acknowledge him. When he shouts, "Put down your fucking purse," and points his gun to my head, things start to click. The man says, "Put down your bags," and I tell him, "Okay, okay, I'm putting them down over here." He orders me to walk over to him toward the alley and get down on the fucking ground, and I agree. I'm coming, okay, okay. My heart is beating a million miles a minute, and my hands still smell sticky with banana. I know I need to get away. I don't know why, but my mouth won't stop working. Look, see, I'm on the ground. My stuff is over there. Please just take my stuff, but he doesn't like it. Shut the fuck up, okay? He gets on top of me and puts the gun to my head. At this point, I should mention the fact that I'm on my way to coach a high school practice, and I'm dressed like a dude. Huge baggy pants, hat, jacket. If not for my telltale voice, I'd look like a prepubescent 90 rap star. Anyway, as the guy gets on top of me, gun to my head, he looks at me and pauses. I can't tell you why I know this, but I swear that at this moment, it clicks for him that I'm a woman. He gets off of me, stands up, and points to the dark alley. "Come with me." My stomach hurts. I remember that there have been a recent rash of sexual assaults in my neighborhood, during the daytime no less. When the man points down that dirty alleyway, my internal voice speaks the fuck up. Says voice #1, "There was no way in hell you are going to go down there without a fight." "But he has a gun, you dipshit," replies voice #2. "Fucking follow me." The real voice, his voice hollers. So I do what I do best, I talk. "I'm coming, I'm following you." I call, and the man makes a crucial mistake. He believes me. I take 2 tiny steps backwards toward the sidewalk, and he turns his body and his gun toward the alley. This is my moment. I take a deep breath, tuck my head down in case he starts shooting, and start sprinting away. I hear a voice screaming in a high-pitched wail before I realize that it's mine. After running 6 or 7 blocks, I head back to my apartment, hoping he's not there to see where I lived. The police check out the alleyway an hour later, but the potential attacker is long gone. The only evidence of the encounter is my banana peel browning in the alleyway and the adrenaline rush that I couldn't shake for days. I would be lying if I said that if that experience doesn't bother me still, but I'm so fortunate to mainly be haunted by the what-ifs and not the what-dids. Story 4, when I was in high school, I had a really good friend who lived next door to a house that was always up for sale. People would move out in the middle of the night without a word, and it hadn't had the same owner for more than 6 months straight for a couple of years. One night we were really bored, and he suggested we go explore the house next door since it had sat empty for a while. We go around back, and there's a dog door that he can crawl through, and he unlocks the door and lets me in. The house itself is really unremarkable. It looked like it was built in maybe the 1950s and was a craftsman-style house in an older, nicer part of town. My friend's house was similarly built. The kitchen had a really nice built-in breakfast table set against a picture window. The house's electricity was off, but you could see the street light through the window. My friend and I sit down on the floor across from this table and are just hanging out talking. Why, who knows, all of a sudden my friend screams, and in that instant, my vision goes black. But it wasn't that I just couldn't see. My body was engulfed in this sickly coldness from head to toe. I start screaming, and I feel my friend's hand grabbing mine and pulling me in some direction forcefully. My vision slowly comes back, and I start to warm up when I realize that we're outside under the street light. It was December, and should have been much warmer inside of that house. Finally, I look at my friend and he looks scared. I'm really confused and kind of panicked myself, and finally ask him what happened. He says that as I was talking, a black thing, this figure that was all black and only had the vague shape of a girl, crawled out from under the table and sat on top of me. Apparently I started groping around with my eyes wide open, like I couldn't see, and he was so freaked out he pulled me out of the house. We're still friends and we bring it up every now and then, but the story itself never changes, and it still sends chills down my spine. To this day, I've never felt such blackness or coldness in my life. It was palpable, almost sticky. For a couple of days afterward, I couldn't shake this unsettling feeling, and I could never walk past that house again. Ugh, I'm scared to get out of bed now. Story 5, every time I stay at my grandma's house, I hear someone walking upstairs. It starts at one side of the room, casually walks to the other and stops. This will happen maybe twice a night. I didn't start hearing it until I was about 14, when my grandparents made me start sleeping in a different room on the first floor because they starting sleeping in separate bedrooms. Blah, blah, blah. Regardless, both of their rooms are also on the first floor. For a little backstory, I have always been afraid of the upstairs at their house. I don't know why, but it's always freaked me out, and I refuse to ever go up there alone. I'm 23 now, still won't go up alone. There's one room specifically, though. It's a long, narrow bedroom. When you open the door, there are closets on your left and right, a bed placed roughly in the middle of the room, and a window on the far side opposite the door. I was told growing up by my grandparents that the sons of the previous owner claimed to see a gorilla come out of the closet at night, dance around the room, and go back into the closet. I thought nothing of this story until I had to start sleeping in the other room, the room located directly below the scary room upstairs. So we all go to bed, all the lights in the house are off, and I'm still awake. Lying on the bed, then I heard it, thump, thump, thump. Starting at one end of the room upstairs, it got closer to me, passed right above me, and continued to the end of the room where it stopped. I'm wide awake, terrified out of my mind. It was no question to me that I had heard footsteps. I knew that slow, casual pace. I was freaked out and went to my grandpa's room. I told him what I heard. He told me that the house is old and it creaks, but he turned the dining room light on for me, so I felt a little safer. I tried going back to sleep. Then it started again, this time from where it ended the first time, by the window upstairs. It walks over me again and stops when it reached the door. I thought it was over until 5 seconds later when I heard it coming down the stairs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Silence as it reached the landing. Then 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and silence again as it reached the first floor. I was frozen in shock, whatever it was. It was on my floor of the house, and sadly unaffected by the dining room light. I was staring at the doorway to my room. The dining room light was shining in, and my vision began to distort. I felt dizzy with fear, so I pulled the blankets over my head and suddenly heard a scratching sound from inside my room. I knew exactly where it was coming from. My grandpa's gun case. It was a very obvious sound, scratching on the wood, long scratches down the front of the gun case door. I could even hear the door ever so slightly tapping against the frame as each scratch began. I tried to scream, and I couldn't. I took a second to take a deep breath and let out a loud scream. In seconds, my grandpa had made it to my room, and I was relieved. Needless to say, he still didn't believe me. So I did what any normal person would do. I draped a sheet over the side of the bed and slept underneath it. I wrapped myself tight in a comforter, put on headphones, and turned my back to the door. There could be a party of ghosts in my room, and I wouldn't even know. The next morning, my grandpa told my grandma about what happened the night before. She said, "Oh, that's silly, you know, your cousin woke me up the last time she stayed here. She came in my room saying, 'I hear footsteps.' I slept under the bed for the rest of my week's stay with them. I've stayed there countless times since that happened, and I hear the footsteps every time. I sleep on top of the bed now, but keep my back to the door and sleep with headphones on. I haven't heard it come down the stairs since that first night. But if it does, I don't want to know. Edits because I'm bad at writing and I can't stay in the same tense." Story 6. When I was about 10 or 11, I was living with my grandmother. My bed was in the corner of my room with the long side against the wall and right up against the window. Crappy paint drawing to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. Well, I slept with my head towards the wall, and I was usually turned towards the wall with the window. This window was a weird size and didn't have any blinds, just curtains. The curtains hung in front of the window, so there was a small gap towards the side of the window, where you could see into or out of my room if you were standing at the right angle. I was laying in bed trying to fall asleep when I turned my eyes towards the window and saw something standing there, looking right at me. It was just a silhouette, but something about the way it was shaped just felt wrong. The head was large, the body was a little too skinny, and the way it was bent over just didn't feel right at all. I tried to act like I was asleep and rolled ever so slightly to try to get a better look, but it stood back up and ran away. It was tall too, at least 6 foot. I hopped out of bed and ran into the living room where my grandmother was watching the 10 o'clock news. I told her that I saw someone looking into my window, and she grabbed a flashlight and ran outside. I followed her, and we looked around trying to figure out what it was. We couldn't see anything at all, and after that night we set the curtains further back so they completely blocked the window. Whatever the hell it was, we never figured it out. Story 7. Short story version of a really terrifying thing that happened to me. It is all true. I wrote it down a while ago for r/Nosleep. There are some wonderful things about being young, poor, and in love. Sadly, this is about none of those things. When I was 22, I decided to move in with my equally poor boyfriend. Unfortunately, poor plus poor still equals mostly poor, but not so destitute that we couldn't afford an apartment in a college town. We happily moved into our little one-bedroom, first-floor apartment. Sure, it had problems. The lead-based paint was so thick, we were sure we could survive a nuclear attack. The bathroom didn't have a vent. Instead, it had a window in the shower. The appliances were from the time of my grandmother, but it was home. Our home, we loved it. My boyfriend worked the graveyard shift, and I worked days, so we spent a lot of time apart. That meant that when we were together, we enjoyed the simple things in life. A lot of naked time. Over time, when I was waking up and taking my morning shower, my boyfriend, who was just getting home, realized that he could come up to our open shower window and sneak a peek. I always caught him. It was in good fun, and we laughed. Eventually, I started to notice there was a log standing upright outside of that window. I continually asked him why he would need that. He was tall enough already. He'd claim it wasn't his and move it away when I went outside to show him. Yet every few days, it would move right back. The guys who cared for the yard were there several times a week, so they must have just been moving it back out of the way against the building. Finally, before the snow fell, the yard workers cleared away all the yard debris and we went on in peaceful oblivion, candy-coated, love-filled oblivion. Time went on and our lease was up, but there was a great special at our cheap apartment complex. We could now rent 2 bedrooms, even cheaper than our 1 bedroom. We happily signed the new lease. The only real problem was that our 1 bedroom apartment was on a nice suburban street, facing houses, so we never really noticed how bad our neighborhood was. We were moved to the other end of the community, behind an abandoned strip mall. Our front yard consisted of a dark alley and some dumpsters behind a recently vacated Chinese buffet, where a lot of stray cats seemed to live. None of this mattered in our dimly lit front yard, though. Our apartment was super cheap and super huge. What more could we ask for? That year, we were so happy that my boyfriend went to buy me a ring on Valentine's Day. Being young and giddy in love, he wasn't able to keep the secret, and I told him yes before he could even ask the question. He didn't have a lot of money, so he bought a ring with the help of a friend's father, who owned a jewelry store. He got a good price, but with the drop in price, so comes a drop in attention to detail. I was devastated when he brought home the ring, along with our wedding band set, to find out that someone had mistaken my very tiny 4-ring size with a 12. My rings were made for monster hands. What a terrible way to start our engagement. Clearly they needed to go back, so he put them in his glove box, but then a snowstorm prevented him from taking them back that day. The next day he went to his car to find that it had been broken into. Nothing had been taken, except the rings from the glove box. We never did have the money to replace them. We personally went to every pawn shop in the area, and everybody said they hadn't seen anything. I began to be jealous any time I'd see a woman with large fingers wearing a silver ring with Celtic not work. I kept telling myself that her dead-beat boyfriend stole my ring to give to that whore. Winter passed and summer came. With the summer came the warm breezes and the fresh air through our open windows. What the summer didn't bring was more money not for us and not for the city. We lost our phone service for non-payment, but it didn't matter. The only people we talked to were each other anyway. Meanwhile, the city cut police and even closed a few stations. Most of them in our neighborhood. It didn't matter, though. Summer days are long, and our dingy little corner of the community wasn't at all intimidating in the daylight. One night my husband to be turned in for the night early, and so I decided that after a long day, what I really needed was a nice soak in the bath. I walked into the bathroom and began to run the water, adding my bath salts and bubble bath. I opened the window for that nice summer breeze and took off my clothes and dumped them in a pile by the open bathroom door. I then grabbed my laptop to set on the closed toilet seat so I could relax in the tub with a movie. This would be at least 2 hours of pure bliss. Nothing beats a long soak in my book. I turned the volume up on my laptop and relaxed the hours away with one movie and then another. What must have been 4 hours later, I pulled the plug on the drain and sat while the water swirled away. I slowly stood up and stretched and dried off, the now cool night air hitting my face through the window. I figured I'd just leave that open, though. The apartment could use the airing out. I stepped out of the tub and across the bathroom. I didn't bother to move my pile of clothes, instead stepping around them in a manner to get out the partially opened bathroom door. This move put me looking back into the bathroom, right out the window, where I saw a tall man. At first I was startled, but quickly realized it was just my fiancé playing a trick on me, like he used to do at our old apartment. Then I saw his eyes, up too high in the window, and everything in my head began to swim. I couldn't scream, I couldn't move. I could only stand there, naked, and stare. Then everything came into startling detail. He was standing up on something so high up that I could see his full torso in the window. His full torso and his penis. There was a man outside my window jerking off. The motion drew my attention to his hand. Everything happened in a split second after I saw him, while I was frozen to the spot. I noticed he was wearing a silver ring with Celtic not work on it. I made a mental note of ways to identify him as I finally unfroze and ran to the bedroom. "There's a man outside the bathroom window," I said so fast my fiancé couldn't understand as he woke up. What he asked, I repeated, "There's a man outside the bathroom window. He's jerking off, he was watching me. Oh my God, make him go away." I was finally in hysterics as everything sunk in. That man could have been there, hovering over me for hours. The only thing separating us was a thin screen. When I had stood up, his penis was inches from my face, his body towering over me. I just kept covering myself with blankets and telling my fiancé to make him go away. By the time my fiancé woke up and went to check on the situation, nobody was anywhere around. There was only a log standing upright like a step outside our bathroom window. In the aftermath, we filed a police report, but had no phones to call, so had to drive a good 20 minutes away to do so. Then they didn't have enough forces to do anything about the situation anyway. We didn't have the money to break our lease. Instead, we spent the rest of the year living in fear. I covered every window with black contact paper. I wedged boards into every window so they couldn't be opened. The bathroom window never again opened. I never left without pepper spray. I never left after dark. But for the rest of that year, most nights, I'd hear a faint noise outside our bedroom window, which was next to our bathroom. In the morning, when my fiancé would check it out, there would be imprints in the ground, as if somebody had recently been standing there. I wish I could say this is just a story. I wish I could say that, but it is all the truth of 3 long years of my life. I still can't sleep at night. Story 8, this is the story of OM. In high school, I had a good friend named Steve. One day freshman year, 2007-ish, he told my group of friends about an odd turn of events that happened to his brother, Tim, a couple years prior. Tim went to college somewhere in New Hampshire. One night around 2 a.m., Tim and his good friend decided they needed Dunkin' Donuts, even though the nearest Dunkin' Donuts was across state lines. I don't know much about New Hampshire's geography, but I'm told this trek involved going through a narrow highway that takes them through some woods. On the way back from Dunkin' Donuts, a mysterious car pulled in front of them on the highway. It was a red compact car with the markings scratched off, and its only defining feature was its license plate that had a black O and a green M, who will henceforth be known just as OM. Around this time, Tim describes weird coincidences happening, like his phone losing service and the jazz station playing Smells Like Teen Spirit. But I'll admit it, those could have just been weird coincidences. At this time, Tim and his friend were sensing some bad juju from this guy, so Tim let his foot off the gas and was happy to just let OM go off on his way. But OM wasn't done with them. As soon as Tim slowed down, OM did the same. Tim thought this was weird, but maybe if he floors it, he could get around OM. But when Tim sped up, so did OM. Tim and Co. were freaking out at this point and had no idea what they were dealing with, but they saw a curve in the road up ahead. They saw OM go around it, and they decided to just stop. Their adrenaline was pumping, and they weren't sure how long they sat there. But after what felt like 20 minutes, they worked up the courage to continue on their way. Maybe OM would have mercy on them. But as soon as they got around the corner, OM was there. The exact same distance as they last saw him, matching their speed. OM clearly was without mercy. Tim and his friend were rightfully scared for their lives, and relented to just going forward and hoping they could get out of this alive. Eventually, there was a fork in the highway. One led towards the college town, while the other led further into the woods. Our heroes went home, while OM ventured into the unknown. Tim never saw OM again. Epilogue 1. So I was told this story my freshman year, and was convinced it didn't happen, and even my buddy Steve wasn't exactly sure of its veracity. But around 2008-2009, I was listening to the local talk radio station while doing homework and heard a news bulletin. There was a murder in a neighboring county the previous night, and the sole witness saw a car leaving the scene of the crime. She described it as a red compact car with a license plate that had a black O and a green M. I nearly shit myself. I'm in suburban Orange County, California. What the fuck is OM doing all the way over here? Maybe I was just hearing things. I ran into Steve the next day at school, and he heard the same report. We learned two things. One, neither of were crazy, and two, that OM was fucking real. Epilogue 2. This previous May, my friend Blake was on his way home from dropping off his girlfriend around 2 a.m. For some reason, he decided to take a highway that leads through a canyon home. While driving along, a car pulls in front of him. It's a red compact car with a license plate that has a black O and green M. Blake was familiar with the stories and became rightfully scared and fell as far behind OM as OM let him. When they reached near the end of the canyon, OM did a U-turn and went back while Blake continued home to change his pants and sleep. Epilogue 3. This is not the first time I posted this story. In a previous thread, Ravetti posted their own OM sighting. That is all I know about OM. I'm thoroughly convinced he's a cross-country serial killer who crosses state lines to confuse the police, but I admit it's only conjecture. Story 9, I was around 13-14, and in my upstairs bathroom. Being lazy, I decided to go in without turning the light on, since the room was dimly lit by the light in the hallway. From the bathroom, I can see the woods in the backyard, kind of like a hill that went up into a sparsely populated second development behind mine. Anyway, I'm taking my glorious piss, when suddenly out the forest I see a light, not a direct light, like somebody shining a flashlight facing away from me, like an indirect illumination. I look at it and I'm King, the hell's this? It doesn't move, it just appears and is motionless. I kinda figure it might be a tracker light that was kicked on by movement and continue about my business. The light's still on a good minute later and still facing away, and I walk up to the window. It turns completely around, like a flashlight. It's a wide spread and slowly focuses and sharpens as it shines directly at me, and it's a good quarter mile away. It's a steady stream of light, and it starts slowly moving towards the window and extremely bright. I can its reflection in the glass, but it doesn't light the room up, just a bright light directly on me. To give you an idea, this is a third-story bathroom with a good 40-foot drop to the ground and a hill that goes up alongside of it, a quarter-mile away, and this thing came at the window like it was running on solid ground. I run to turn the lights on. The second I do, it disappears, and to this day I still don't know what exactly it was. Story 10. It's not a scary or disturbing story. Certain members on my dad's side of the family, there are 6 kids including him, have some sort of like spirit/premonition type things that happen from time to time. It's not everyone, but my grandma, my dad, myself, my uncle, and one of my uncle's kids all have or have had something related to a spirit or premonition type thing happen more than once, usually once every couple of months. There are way too many stories to tell here, but 2 stick out in my mind. One, a couple years ago, my dad was getting ready for work, and he was in the shower, and he kept having flashes of a war vet, dressed in full uniform. He didn't think anything of it. As the day went on, he kept having a weird sensation in his thigh, like when you're wearing a pair of pants with a wallet in the pocket, and you sit down with the wallet still in your pocket. How uncomfortable it becomes, like pressure almost. Same day, I was getting a weird feeling above my heart, not a pain or pressure, just a feeling. I told my dad, and he told me about what had happened to him that day. He immediately said, "We need to call Grandma," his mom. So we called her, and we told her everything that had happened to both of us. And he just looked me in the eye and asked my grandma directly through the phone, "Were you touching something today at the house? Or looking at something today, related to great-grandpa?" Her father, she doesn't like to talk too much about him, nothing bad. It just makes her upset because she lost both her parents very young, and had an especially close bond with him, and the phone went silent. After a few seconds she said, "Yes, I was looking through my old trunk and I picked up his wallet, his service awards that are pinned above his heart when in uniform, and a picture of him dressed in full Air Force uniform. We didn't talk about that to anyone, but did discuss it when we saw her next. She is firm believer in this kind of stuff." The second one was when my dad was little. He shared a room with my uncle, which was in the basement. Remember, 6 kids anyways. The room was near the basement TV room where my grandparents sit and watch TV at night. One night my dad woke up just screaming and crying, so my grandparents went in to see what the hell was going on. My grandma hugged him and asked what happened, and he said they all died. All of them, everyone. Off a mountain, someone help them please. My grandma assumed it was a bad nightmare and stayed with him the rest of the night. But he couldn't sleep. He was very, very upset. Next morning, she opened the paper, and there was a horrible train crash in the mountains somewhere in South America. No one survived.